Well, welcome back to another episode of Lessons into Blessing podcast. I'm your host, Tari Thomas, and today we have Acquania Escarne on the show. She is an entrepreneur, a financial coach, a life insurance producer, and most importantly for us today, real estate investor with an investment portfolio worth approximately $34 million. We're going to be talking with her more about her journey from real estate investing to hotel ownership. Yes, guys, it's not just the Hiltons and private equity firms. Individuals are investing in hotels as well. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that today. So if you can help me, welcome to the show, Acquania.
Hey, everybody. So good to see you. Super excited to have this conversation.
I'm super excited to have you on the show because this is definitely a topic that a lot of people do not hear about. And so, you know, it's kind of like my multifamily journey. A lot of people don't realize that it's more than just private equity firms and things like that taking down these type of assets. So I'm definitely excited to jump in and just talk about kind of your journey along the way. So
let's do it. Yeah. Yep. I'm into multifamily too, if we want to talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, we can always do that. And just talk maybe the differences between that and also hotel investments as well. So,
okay. Yeah, sounds good. So how do you want to start?
So one of the things I liked about your bio, so I'm going to start with this, just a background on who you are. It sounded like your dad was an entrepreneur as well, started you on your journey, and he gave you a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki has been a pivotal book for a lot of different people. What do you think your dad was trying to instill in you by handing you that book at 16 years old?
Oh, that's a great question. I think he was trying to tell me the things that he didn't know and had to learn the hard way. And I'm super grateful. I actually have two entrepreneur background parents. My dad mostly in real estate because that's what his grandfather did. And so he saw what it was like to own brownstones in New York and rentals and collect rent. He used to go with Grandpa Watson to collect rent, and his grandfather, my great grandfather, was super, super giving. So my dad also used to see him give some of what he made to those in the community. So that type of spirit, my parents were able to pass on to me. And my mom was a full-time entrepreneur my whole life too, but she had the grit, right? She showed me the grit side of entrepreneurship. My dad showed me the work smarter, not harder side. And he really wanted me to be able to work even smarter. That's why he gave me the book. So at 16, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I didn't just say, oh, I can't do any of this stuff right now. I'm just 16. I actually was like, I'm going to put some visions together of what I would like my future to be, which included not working forever, retiring early. And then when I got my first job that summer, I worked at a retail store and I took my first paycheck and I opened my Roth IRA because that was something that Robert Kiyosaki said, like tax-free income, tax-free buckets, owners, these are the ways that you make money work for you. So that was the attainable thing I could do at that moment. And I did not hesitate to execute that strategy, even though I didn't have the income to do all the things in the book.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And great tip for just young people starting out. That's a great way to start, especially if your company doesn't have a 401k or anything like that. That's a good way to take, your tax money to start earning investments for you from a tax-free standpoint.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's good stuff. So let's get us started. We'll start about kind of like what sparked your interest on the hotel investment journey.
Oh, COVID. Believe it or not, pandemics are good for some things, right? So in 2020, I actually was really eager to get into an apartment syndication because a lot of my friends and some of my colleagues were in the government and investing in apartment syndications. And I was like, how you do that? So when I learned that you could leverage retirement savings to invest in real estate and make money, I decided to explore that more. And the pandemic was actually a time where the government was doing a lot of things, right? We got stimulus checks. They also gave us a temporary provision where we could access retirement funds to for some people live off of, right? Because they were struggling or out of work.
Wow.
But for other people, ding, 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 I leveraged that opportunity to transfer that money into a solo 401k because they allowed me to take a deduction from my retirement account. And they said that I could pay it back in 3 years or whatever, or withdraw the money and like not pay it back, but then deal with the taxes. But because I rolled it over from one qualified retirement account to another one, for those that don't know, a solo 401k is an eligible retirement account for entrepreneurs. Yep. And at the time I had a side hustle. So you do not have to have a full-fledged business to have a solo 401k, but you can take money from your business and save for your retirement. So that way I opened a solo 401k. I rolled over, I don't remember at the time, maybe it's $50,000. I think I started out with $25,000 because I ran the play twice. And
he's like, I got to make sure this is going to work.
So I just took advantage of what was available to me during the pandemic. And I didn't put myself at risk for any tax penalties because I did what was legal and qualified, right? One qualified account to another. Yeah. But that play didn't actually work the way I thought it would, right? Like I thought I was preparing myself for this future apartment syndication. And then in 2020, there were no deals or there weren't any that I could find, right? All the people that I usually go to for advice who had taught me about apartment syndications could not find a deal that made sense. And in real estate, if the numbers don't work, if they don't make sense, if the math ain't math and we're not doing it. So absolutely. I had this money and I was like, what am I going to do? So interestingly enough, a friend that I only knew through Instagram. So there is a such thing as meeting very valuable friends through Instagram. He introduced me to another young lady. Shout out to Davon Reeves. She's a hotel diva. And we did a conference together. And y'all know in 2020, virtual conferences were it, right? Everybody was hosting them. Everybody was tuning into them. So I was a facilitator on her Generational Wealth Conference. I had never met her before, but in that opportunity, I liked her vibes. I liked what she was doing. And I decided, because again, people think networking is just this thing you wake up and it just happens, right. But you have to make a decision. So I decided to keep that relationship going. So I invited her onto my podcast, The Purpose of Money, and she came on and talked about hotel investing. But it didn't stop there because when she came on my podcast, she didn't even have a hotel. She just knew how it worked because of her experience in the industry, because of the money she'd managed for others who owned hotels. She knew how the system worked, but she was still looking for her first hotel to own. But a month after being on my podcast, she sent an email to her email list, and I signed up for her email list because I wanted a hotel deal.
Right.
And she said, do you want to invest in a Hilton? And this is where, I always say God has orchestrated my life, because the first time she sent the email, I actually didn't see it, totally missed it, and may have missed this opportunity had she not emailed again. So the second email pops up and I'm like, what? This is literally what we just talked about. And I am so interested. So we immediately, my husband and I, looked at the deal, looked at the numbers, and I would say less than a month. Like by the time I saw the email, transferred my money, and we closed, it was less than a month. But we invested in a Hilton in El Reno, Oklahoma in October of 2020.
No, that number one, that's awesome. Number one, I'm going to just pick out some things that I heard.
Go for
it. Number one, you were ready, right?
Yes.
And I always tell people, understand what's at your fingertips, because you don't even understand what you may have access to, not only assets, but relationships, all of those things, right? That you tapped into, whether it was COVID, it was a bad time, but you tapped into resources you had to be able to do it. I think self-directed plans, solo 401ks, yes. Anything like that, that you have access to, where you see that you can make greater return on your investment over what it's currently invested in, right?
Exactly.
Or if it's just sitting in a bank doing nothing, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's kudos to you for that. Number two, just being able to reach out, see where opportunities where you were seeking, right? So, we overeducate at this time period, right? And just where we are in our society. But that next step of just really pulling the trigger. And so being able to connect yourself with people, whether you know them physically in the same state or virtually, continue to seek out and find what you're looking for, you're going to find it. And
Absolutely.
I do love God for that as well, because that is the same experience that I've had as well. So I love that.
Yeah.
And then just the hotel journey, I would love for you to be able to talk about, because it's Oklahoma, it's not even a state where you lived in. I know in the multifamily space, and you kind of briefly mentioned about real estate syndications. Really, all that is group investing for those people that don't know. So a group of individuals are coming together to invest in a large deal, whether that be hotels, apartments. And so you kind of need to know who that individual is, right? Yes. So
yes,
you're going ahead and doing the work. So like, take us down a little bit more on kind of some of the things you did to kind of just understand the investment and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because for most people, they're not just going to wire money to a stranger. Right. So the most important thing is I fostered a relationship with someone that I felt I could trust, because I was giving them a large portion of my savings. And I did feel like, hey, I might lose this money. However, I feel like this is an opportunity I should take advantage of. But with that said, I only invested what I was willing to lose. So I definitely want to emphasize this part, because y'all going to sit here and say, I saw the podcast and I gave somebody my last dollar and I lost it and now I don't have anything. That's not what I'm telling you. Invest what you are willing to lose, right? And I was able to say, hey, I have so much saved for retirement that this investment is not going to make or break me. And I'm going to continue to save for retirement, right? I didn't just stop there and say, this is my retirement plan. This hotel is going to make me rich. No, I didn't do that. But what I also did was I asked a million questions. So Davon will tell you, we are more than virtual friends now. We're like family. I'm auntie to her son and she's auntie to mine. And so we've done trips together and we have grown together. And now she owns 3 hotels. So clearly we have matured together in our ownership. But I got to know her and I asked a lot of questions. I asked hard questions. I asked to shadow her. I asked to learn. I didn't just take this as an opportunity to give somebody my money. I was like, this is a learning experience and I am going to learn so that I can be in a position to own my own hotel one day. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm at, so we're at a point where I'm the one who found the deal. I'm the one who raised the money and I'm the one who's responsible for the success of the business. But that was stuff that I was asking. How do we get our money back? When do we get our money back? What type of updates are we going to get from you as the person who's managing the day-to-day? Yeah. What are my expectations as an investor? If I bring someone else onto this investment, which I did, I brought 2 other women in with me and they invested their own money. What are their expectations, responsibilities, and how does this work? But all of that helped us do group economics really well. And we are all family now because it was only 6 of us that came together for that side. There was a partnership in the real estate space. So we brought 6 investors to the table. And then there was another group of investors who brought investors to the table. And that's how we were able to purchase the whole property. So that all was a part of my research, my questions. And then, looking at the pitch deck, right? Like asking questions about the estimated returns and, how do we know that this is going to rebound after a pandemic when no one's traveling? What's the exit strategy? Yeah. You always want to know, how am I going to get out of this? And how long am I going to be in this? So hotels, you're traditionally invested for 5 to 7 years. I knew that, hey, I could do a 5 to 7 year timeline because I don't need this money tomorrow. I'm not retiring tomorrow. So those were all things that helped me make an informed decision about investing money into that particular deal.
No, that's great. That's really, really, really good. All the questions that I would be asking as well. So just help us see what, or understand what you talked about, the time period, the whole period being around 5 to 7 years, typically for hotel investments. Mm-hmm. What are the typical returns like on the hotel investments? And I'm sure it varies across the board, but just a general
absolutely.
range.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? You have a choice. You can choose to invest in whatever deals you want, and you can choose to invest in based on the terms. So I personally like to invest where the opportunity will double or triple my initial investment. So if I put in 25K, I want to walk away with 75K. If I put in 25K, my minimum is to walk away with 50K. So if I'm not able to predict where the revenue is going to come from to do those types of returns, I'm normally not interested. But like I said, this is not a get rich quick scheme. Right. So I'm not expecting that return in 1 year, 2 year, or even 3 years. I'm normally expecting it after 5 to 7 years. Yeah. And real estate is just one way I invest. I also have money in the stock market. I also have regular savings. I also have my business revenue. So I want people to understand you can choose to bet it all on black, right? But that's not my recommendation. If you are looking to have cash flow, you may want to look at rentals over hotels, because I will be honest, hotels are the long game. The returns are throughout ownership. You'll get something quarterly or annually, depending on the terms of when they've agreed to pay distributions, which is a portion of your profit from owning the business or investing in the business. But the big check comes at the sale, right? Yeah. When someone else comes along and says, I want to buy your hotel, I want the land, I want the business, the big check comes then, right? So you have to be prepared to take your 5, 10, or 15,000 per year returns and then get that big check at the time of sale.
That's good.
So that's another thing. And so people ask me, like, well, I'm trying to quit my job and live off of my residual income. And I'm like, great. Maybe you need to do a few rentals first.
For sure.
And that's going to give you the cash flow you need. Yeah. And then you can use that cash flow to invest in other deals. And that's exactly what I've done. So like, for example, we have a rental in Maryland. I'm in a syndication in Orlando. I also have other streams of income. So for me, whenever I invest in a small business or real estate project that pays a little bit of revenue every month or year, I'll let that add up, and then I will reinvest that into a bigger project. So my syndications have paid out, the apartments pay out monthly, the hotels quarterly. And so once I get a substantial amount in the solo 401k, I will reinvest that into something else. Recently, 2024 is all about small businesses. So I've actually invested in a wine company, a startup, a women-owned startup, helping women get funding, resources, and everything they need to run their businesses. And then I've also invested in hair products, interestingly enough. So these are just the type of things that I have backed because I support and I believe in. But I feel like these are things that I don't know how they're going to turn out, right? I've invested in a venture capital fund. I don't know if that venture capital fund is going to invest in the next Google or it's going to go bust. But my hope is that it invests in the next Google, right? Because that's a big win for me. Yeah. But I've also learned that, hey, I got to spread my risk because one of these might pan out, right? That's going to be the big one that pays for all the other ones. So that's kind of my plan. Is progressive for me. I started out with cash flow. Then I got into what I would call alternative investments. I consider hotels alternative investments.
It is alternative for sure.
And then small businesses, which is the higher risk because, again, businesses fail every single day. Yeah. But they've also been the ones to give me the personal return. So the small businesses I've invested in, I do have a relationship with the owners. I do have insight to the actual work and impact that they're doing. And so it's not just about money anymore. It's about impact. It's about helping that business thrive so they can help other women. So those are the things that motivate me now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love number one. You talk about a lot of different things, but just the number one, reinvesting your funds, so important. So I think that's you got to choose between kind of a cash flow strategy or, overall appreciation. You're looking for that big gain at the end. So depending on that, but if you do cash flow, being able to accumulate that, pool it up, and then reinvest it. So you have that compound interest going on. So I love that you threw that in there. Mm-hmm. And then once you get to a point where you're now getting your investment needs met, you have the ability to really consciously invest your money into the things that really make sense to you. I feel like everything should be that, right? Yes. So, you know, I have a big heart for affordable housing. So those are some things that I look out for. But the things that, hey, it makes money and it makes sense. Literally makes sense.
Yes.
Right? Like that those are always wins. So I love that you're tapping on that. Now for hotels, what would you say are your biggest, you talked about a myriad of different diverse type of investments. If somebody were asking you why hotels, what would you say to them?
Okay, that's a great question. So even in hotels, there's diversity, right? And you can tell this because the types of hotels we stay at are different. I have my girlies who only want to be in 5-star luxury resorts. I do not invest in those because those are expensive to run and expensive to buy. Right. I have my families, my middle America families who road trip it, and they want to have more space for the kids to run around, kitchenettes and breakfast available in the morning. So that's a limited service hotel. And that's where I invest my money because most of America is staying there. They're staying in the Hilton Home 2 suites and the Embassy suites. And that's where middle America can afford to stay and get what they need and have the ideal family vacation that creates memories. It's good. Also the cash flow, right?
Yeah, that's good.
But there's also the Motel 6s and the Super 8s. Those are cash flows too, really high cash flows, but normally have less profit margin if you're using a property manager to run them. So I don't invest in those because they are the hotels where the owner is at the front desk running the property, and right. I don't have time for that. So you have to think about that. But for me, I went with a limited service suites type of facilities because there's the cash flow and there's the ability to have a property manager who handles the day-to-day. So you're not checking in guests all the time. And I also appreciate that depending on your level of investment, you do get hotel perks. So I can travel and stay in brands at a discount or low cost to me and my family. I also like the fact that this is a space where bigger monetary players play. And so it is access to a network of higher net worth individuals who are also invested in that legacy building hotel, pass it on to my relatives space, which I'm not saying there are, people aren't in that space elsewhere, but that this is where they are because hotel investing is expensive. And so in order to be in this field, you have to have network or net worth. Normally you have both. And that's a space where I want to be in, right? So that is a benefit that continues to pay for itself. The longer I stay in the industry, the more people I meet and leverage those relationships. Plus, it is different, right? It is a space where we need more people of color. I have decided to be the messenger and the person who serves in that space. Thank you, Jesus, for giving me the opportunity, because let's be real, less than 2% of hotel owners are African American. And let's not talk about how many are women. So I do feel led to be in this space, to be vocal in this space, to teach you about this space. So if you so choose to invest, you know how to do it and you know that you are welcome here, right? But it's not easy. It's not easy. Sometimes finding a deal requires you to get things before they hit the market. And a lot of hotels are sold between families, so they never hit the market. Some people will try to take advantage of you, from contractors to lenders, when they don't think you know what you're talking about. So you have to come to the table with your research, market research on what the value is of the property and knowing how to run the numbers or having the network to help you. So I will be honest, my lane is not running all the numbers because I rather raise the money. So I have someone who I partner with who's the number queen, right? She can do underwriting in her sleep, and she can also fact check the numbers too. So I like to leverage building my network to help me make the best decisions. But ask me to raise $1 million in a month, I got you. Like, I did it this year. I'm willing to do it again. And together we can bring our mind, knowledge, and network to buy properties.
Absolutely.
And who knows, I might expand to wanting to do more of the analytical, side of it, but I'm a logistics girly.
Yeah.
I'm they call me money bags. So I just want to network. I just want to raise money. I want to create investors. That's my favorite space.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I definitely believe it's a team sport. You talked about high network or high net worth. And I recently started a meetup about in 2023 on multifamily, just teaching kind of the same space where you were in on the hotel ownership side, just pouring out everything that I knew so that, for the group economics, as you talked about, us coming together to take down large assets. So, you talked about some of the key skills there, either knowing how to raise the money. If these, investments or these assets are being sold between families, you have to have that high network to understand who are the people who own these properties and getting in front of them, right? Which is the same thing as getting in front of brokers on the multifamily side, and making sure you're in front of the people who are doing the deals, right?
Exactly.
What would you say for someone getting into this space? Number one, they have to know you, right? Or they have to know someone who is going to be managing this type of deal to be able to, because I know there's some constraints around syndication, raising funds that's governed kind of by the Security Exchange Commission. So we want to stay within rules. And I think, or I know for multifamily, just when I've been had to raise funds, you had to know the person that's operating the deal. Is that very similar in the hotel space as well?
Yeah. So the rules are the same. Crowdfunding is basically the crowdfunding regulations are the same. And as the person who's doing the deal, you have the choice on what type of raise you want to do. So in my opportunities, we have done crowdfunding where we can extend to non-accredited investors, which are individuals who either do not have $1 million in net worth, or they do not make at least $200,000 a year as an individual, or $300,000 or more as a married couple. So if you want to be able to extend it to people who are not in that multi-level $1 million net worth yet, you have to know them, right? 6 degrees of separation, and you cannot publicize these deals on social media or websites as like a, hey, do this now. You can't put flyers up. There are rules on how you can recruit investors, because we do not want someone who's less savvy to invest their last dollar, lose their money, and then want to sue or, cry Bloody Mary because they risked it all. So you have those rules and you have to follow them. Like, I'm not going to jail for you.
Right.
And I don't want you to go to jail for me. Right. So that's really, really important. But aside from that, you also have this grand opportunity to, in most cases, you can do, I think it's 35 non-accredited investors. So you have 35 people you can bring into a space they've never been into, and allow them an opportunity to invest in deals that are not readily available. But if you want to, you can also say, nah, I just want to deal with accredited investors, which means they have to have $1 million in net worth, or make at least $200,000 a year if they're single, $300,000 a year if they're married. And so that limits your pool, right? But it also assumes that the person giving you their money is a little bit more savvy, a little bit more aware of what they're investing in, and they understand the risk, and they're still willing to invest with you. So you will get different types of people, but I think what makes it fun is that you're bringing communities together that didn't know each other before, and you're accomplishing major goals together. And so that's what makes it all worthwhile for me.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So this year I took down my first multifamily property. So 94 units. So yeah, pretty excited about that. And so it's the same deal, like very excited about just what it's going to be able to offer those people. We did a 506B. For those that don't know, that's what you were talking about on the being able to have 35 investors who are non-accredited to be able to jump into the deal. And so I love that you're offering another alternative investment in the hotel space. I think the more people hear about it and hear that this is a possibility, it's gonna spread amongst communities that don't typically hear that they can invest in these types of deals.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know, because you didn't ask me to invest in your opportunity, but did you also consider a crowdfunding platform? Because for my last hotel raise, we used a crowdfunding platform, which the SEC gives even more flexibility because they vet the investors. So then I don't have to keep track of who's accredited and who's not. And that helped it open up to even more people, because when you're a crowdfunding platform, then it's based on the ratio of your assets to your income. And the rules are a lot more open. Thank you, Obama. So
I definitely have. I've invested in a crowd fund, but I am going to start opening up that, because that opens up the opportunity where people don't have to invest as much as they would if it was a 506B. And so, yes, because I really definitely want to be able to open up opportunities to more and more individuals. So,
we can talk about it. We use Vestor.com, which is a Black-owned platform, Black female-owned platform. And that was great because it helps, again, streamline how people invested, visibility, and then the SEC regulates them. So she had to do an audit, collect paperwork, make sure everything was on the up and up, and be consistent in how she promoted the opportunity. So she has a website that can promote and advertise the deal. She did free webinars, but how you talk about it on social, we still complied with all the SEC rules. So that's the kind of ways. And it also helps people feel a little more comfortable investing with you, because then they have that security and assurance that this platform, audited by the SEC, is following the rules. And so that gives you some protection. But I will be clear, the investment is still at your own risk, right? So the portal you invest through is regulated, but the investment itself has the potential to be your next million or fail, right? Businesses fail every single day. So I just want to be realistic to those who are listening, to know that you still have to be willing to lose your investment. And if you are not in a position to lose your investment, don't do it, right? You're not in a position to invest. But if your mindset is stretched and you're ready to rock and roll, go for it.
Absolutely. And always do your due diligence. I never say that enough. I don't care if you know me or not. Ask all your questions, just like you asked your questions when you started jumping into the hotel space. Absolutely. So this wouldn't be Lessons into Blessings if we did not end off the show with asking just some of the lessons you've learned along the way in your hotel journey. So if you want to tell us, what's your biggest challenge or trial that you faced jumping into the hotel space, maybe as a woman or as an African-American, and how you were able to overcome it to turn it into a blessing now?
I would say, and don't take this the wrong way, y'all, this is a no judgment zone, but this was my first year doing my own deal, raising money. And I would say the biggest challenge was getting our people to understand that this is a viable way to invest and to multiply your money. And I understand the challenge exists because this is not something that we talk about often, and people just don't know how it works. They don't understand it, and they're trying to Google or compare it to things they do know. And sometimes it's just not the same, right? Like, I do think hotels and multifamily syndications are more similar than hotels and rentals. Obviously, rentals are rented. I guess you could say Airbnbs might be nightly. And so that could be the best comparison, in that in a hotel, you can change the rate every night. And your goal is to make as much money per night as possible. But that doesn't look like a long-term rental, right? Where you sign a lease and you're paying monthly. Some people just don't understand how that works. And so I did have trouble convincing some people who are only like, traditional conservative investors want to part with their money to do something like this because they just had no experience. And I kept saying, well, if you don't do it, you won't have experience. So where are you expecting to get this experience from? And I just, and there are times where I, as a investor, have to recognize when someone's just not ready. So I'm really good. I'm not pushy. I'm not going to, twist your arm to get you to invest with me. I'll just say, you know what? It's okay feel free to look over the docs, ask me as many questions as you want, come to my webinar a dozen times. Yeah. And if you're not ready to invest, you can invest in the next one. I just don't know when that's going to be. The other thing that I've realized is like, it's exhausting. You know, raising money is exhausting. Following up on people, getting them to send their money, helping them fill out the documents that are 100 pages long, you know, that is exhausting. And if you're working with people who are not tech savvy, add on the tech component too. Like, I don't want to tell you how many Zoom calls I did where I literally filled out paperwork with people because they could not do it themselves, right? So I had to learn what I have capacity for. And maybe that's one hotel deal a year, or maybe that's one hotel deal every 5 years. You know, when the next one sells and that money comes in, maybe that's the next one I do. The other challenge, but I'm not saying it to discourage you, but to be an owner, not an investor, because an investor will invest whatever the minimum or more is. But to be an owner where you're finding the deal, finding the investors, and putting your name on the mortgage, you need capital. You're paying for attorneys to do the paperwork. You're paying for LLC formation. You're paying for appraisals. You're paying for sometimes a deposit to your lender that you think you're going to go with, but you're not sure. And all of this adds up to the extent of potentially $200,000. And so I am blessed in that, one, I didn't have to do that alone. I was doing it with my other general partners with me. So we split the costs, but also that I had the money, right? And so we didn't hone on this, but I will say if you're interested in hotel ownership and actually managing the property, the deal, and the investment, then I recommend you start as an investor first, because I invested in a couple of deals to understand how they worked. And I saved my coins and I asked how much do I need so that this year I could do that kind of investment where I can front all of this money on a prayer, right? That this is God's will for me to close on this hotel. And a lot of that cost is upfront. And if you don't close, not reimbursable, right? Because where am I going to get the money back if I don't buy the business? But I've already paid the lawyer. I've already gotten the appraisal, you know, and I've already gotten the brand to review the property and make sure it can remain a Hilton or convert to a Wyndham. All of that costs money. And people don't know that. So those are my two challenges, is getting our people on board when they have no experience in the space, and just preparing myself financially for the cost of ownership. And so your blessing that came out of it, it sounds like, number one, you formed people and a team of people that are the right people to be on board with. Because I think finding your right place on the bus is really important. So for me, that's asset management. For you, it might be, you know, raising the capital and just your investor relations. But that is one thing. If you are going to be on the ownership side, really having that strong team of diverse qualifications, because there's so many elements. One person cannot do it alone, and one person cannot have the funds to be able to put up to do all of the elements that you just talked about. Exactly. They might, but you know, I don't know your pockets, but that's what I see as being the biggest. And that's like the high end. I have had some friends be able to do ownership at 100,000, 150,000. But I think to be really properly prepared, you should shoot for 2, just because you got to pay to change the sign. You know, like there's just things that are going to cost money, even franchise fees, right? The franchise wants their money, and they're not cheap. So you pay a lot of that stuff up front, and then you make your money back when you rent the rooms and you sell the food in the restaurant and you rent the meeting space and stuff like that.
Good stuff. So the model for hotels is, at least the brands that if you're buying a brand, is you're paying that brand a certain number of fees, and you're getting how does that model set up? So so that's a great question. It depends on the
the hotel that you get, right? So remember we talked about the different types.
Yeah.
Well, you have two options. When you're purchasing a hotel that's an existing business and already operational, you also have the choice to keep it as the brand that you're purchasing it under. So in the Hilton, we purchased the Hilton, we kept it a Hilton. Why? Because it was new. It was doing really well, and Hilton is a really good name. So it didn't hurt us. But as an owner, you can actually decide, if you so choose, to purchase a building, put your name on it. It's Acquania Escarne Estates, and that is your personal brand. I don't do that because, again, I'm trying to make the most money I can off this investment, and brand recognition goes a long way. I have people who stay at our hotels because they know what a Hilton looks like. They know what they're going to get, and they want that free breakfast, right? So they're going to book loyalty based on loyalty before anything else. And maybe if they're looking in El Reno, Oklahoma, and they're like, who's Acquania Escarne Estates? They're not going to book there, but they're going to book the Hilton Home 2 Suites right off the highway, right? Yeah. Or the place where they have diamond status and they know they're going to get something free, right? So that's the first thing. So you can name it after yourself. You can have what we call boutique hotels, and there is money in that space too. But like I said, a lot of those hotels are run by the owner. Whereas I'm choosing to do what we call a flag or a franchise. And so franchise model is pretty consistent across the board, whether it's McDonald's or whether it's hotels, is they want a cut of your business, right? If you buy a Hilton and you keep it a Hilton, there's normally not that upfront franchise fee because it's been paid by the last owner, but you may have what we call the monthly reoccurring income fee that you'll still pay, right? They take a percentage of your sales, you use their systems, but you also benefit from their advertising, their brand recognition, their space on Expedia, booking.com, or wherever you are, right? And you get to leverage their name in the process. So the more money you make, the more money they make, and it's a nice win-win. But in our case, in the most recent hotel that we acquired, we did a conversion. So what that means is it used to be something else, i.e. a Holiday Inn, but now because we want to kind of make sure it's resellable in 5 to 7 years, we want to change it to a brand that's popping. We want to upgrade it to the standards of a brand that might not be so expensive to renovate. So there's a lot of reasons on why you pick the brand you pick. And in our situation, Holiday Inns are great, but they're super expensive to comply with their brand specifications. So to keep it as a Holiday Inn was going to be like a $2.8 million budget to renovate, but to convert it to a Wyndham, maybe a $1.8 million budget, right? That's so, you know, I don't want to spend an extra $1 million if I don't have to. And I see that in the long run, I'll make more money because I'll have lower costs, lower fees, lower resale, you know, issues. And a newer property. So that's the decision we made. But in order to convert, you are going to pay a franchise fee to your new brand. You are going to pay reoccurring revenue every month as well. So there's different fees involved depending on how you're acquiring the hotel and what your first 90 days look like, basically. But that's what makes it a worthwhile investment. And you include that stuff in your estimated costs and expenses and your numbers. So you know up front whether or not it makes sense. And for some people, they'll say, I'll pass on this hotel. The numbers don't make sense because of all the fees. And others will say, no, if I renovate the rooms, if I upgrade, then I can raise the rates. This area is growing. Lake Charles is popping, and it's also really big for tourism and business. So we saw an opportunity to make money, whether it's another COVID or not, right?
No, that's good. That's good. I think one thing that you bring up is just really understanding the business plan, right? So you already talked about the diversity of hotel classes, right? But also the diversity of business plans, right? Whether it's conversion or, you know, you're converting one hotel to another brand, or rehabbing or whatever, right? And I'm sure that I'm not using all the right names.
No, you're doing.
I think you have that in all asset classes, right? Where it may be different plans, but understanding that business plan, that location, once again, doing that due diligence, so critically important because all of that makes a difference, right?
Absolutely. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And that's what I'm really honing at, is like, you got to understand, and you don't have to just understand it for yourself. You got to understand it to explain it to investors too, because at the end of the day, they want to know how they're getting their money back, right?
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to tell them, okay, in our hotel, once we renovate, we can change the rate $20, $30 a night times 365 days a year. Then we have a restaurant. So we're going to make revenue off of renting out the restaurant to a local vendor. Why? Because locally, restaurant space is hard to come by and everybody wants somewhere to cook. Right. Yeah. So we were like, income revenue opportunity. Then we were like, we have meeting space. So now we can charge outsiders to come host their Christmas party for their employees. We have a pool. We have a gym. Is that something we want to do a day rate? So when it gets hot and humid, you can come swim with us. So there's just different ways to make money. But I want to be clear, the primary way to make money in a hotel is to rent out them rooms. Okay.
Of course.
That is. And if you ever see a hotel deal, the main moneymaker is going to be renting out the rooms. That is like number one. If that's not the number one on the pitch deck, run. Okay.
Right.
But then you have these other streams of income. And then you also have the option to like build business relationships with certain business partners locally. So let's say a school is in the area and you want them to put all their summer orientation students in your hotel, or you offer a discounted rate, you sign a contract and you give them a room block. That's another way to have guaranteed income, right? Yep, so it's so many ways.
I know. I love it. I love it. I love to, I mean, and that's the way you just continue to make it a win for your investors is how can we continue to, it's no different than, can we rent a locker space in a multifamily? Can we pet income? And so, I mean, the more you can find those extra streams, that just helps boost the revenue for the investors that invest with you. Vending
machines, marketplaces.
All that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
All of that stuff adds up. And I know some hotels make $20,000 just on vending, like selling you that $5 soda that you just had to have when you could have gone to Publix and get it for $2. Right. But hey, like, I'm proud of them. They're creating ways to make revenue from one investment. And I always try to tell people hotels are two things in one. It's an operating business. You can always sell the business, but you also are buying the land. It is land that is finite in this world. And so worst case scenario, you can sell the land, tear down the business and still make money.
That part. Well, thanks for joining us on this show. Lots of knowledge dropped. How can people reach out if they wanted to reach out to you?
Yes, check me out on Instagram. That's my favorite place to play. I am at The Purpose of Money. You'll see me, Acquania Escarne. I'm your real estate investor girly and also your life insurance coach. I also have a website, thepurposeofmoney.com, where I do offer a free consultation. You can click the link in my bio on IG or on my website and get a 15-minute call to talk about your most urgent money needs. And that's where I like to hang out. So please come hang out with me.
Oh, man, I love it. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode. Until next time, stay blessed.